The next topic that we discuss is transistors, or more commonly known as bipolar junction transistors, or BJT. What are transistors? Transistor is a three-terminal device which transfers a signal from a low resistance circuit to a high resistance circuit. The last device that we saw was a PN junction diode, which was a two-terminal device. Okay, this is a three-terminal device. Now it can come in two configurations, either NV, NPN, in which a P type material is sandwiched between two N type materials, or it can come in a variation of PNP, where a N type material is sandwiched between a P type material. Now the essential features of a transistor are the emitter, base and collector regions. So the emitter region is highly doped, the base region is lightly doped, and the collector region is moderately doped. Or more generally, emitter is the leftmost part of the transistor. It will emit the majority carriers towards the base. Base is the middle part and it is sandwiched between the emitter and the collector. Whereas the collector is the right part of the transistor, which will collect the majority carriers which are emitted by the emitter. So in questions, you will see diagrams like these for the case of the transistor. What these mean is, you will not be finding this E, B and C written over there. You need to look at this diagram properly. For example, if I'm making a diagram for this case, so the arrow that you see tells you the direction of the current flow. So in a NPN case, you have base as the P region, emitter as N, and this is N. Now the current will flow in such a way that my P, or basically the P region, has holes as the majority carriers, while the majority carriers in emitter are electrons. Now emitter is supposed to provide the charge carriers for the flow of the current, right? So because N and P are there, this will pump in electrons, and because electrons are going in, the direction of current is out. When I draw the same thing for the case of PNP, this arrow tells me the direction of the current again. Why? Because now P is on the emitter side and base is N type. So because P has more holes in it, when it pumps in all the holes. So the whole direction of holes is basically the direction of the current. Okay, this you should keep in mind when you try to attempt any question. Now we briefly look at the working of a transistor. Note that this is a common base transistor that I am discussing right now, but the workings of the common emitter and common collector transistors are almost similar. So what happens is, my base is common to two circuits, the emitter base region and the collector base circuits. So we call it circuit number 1, circuit number 2. What is common between them? This junction. Okay. Now what happens in the first case? You are supposed to forward bias the emitter base junction. When you forward bias the junction, what does this mean? When you forward bias the junction, my N type has a negative charge, like a negative potential, not a charge, and this is at a higher potential. My base is at a higher potential. Okay, because this is a small PN diode, right? So because of this, what happens is, the majority carriers in N are pushed towards the base region. In base, there is some recombination with holes, which leads to the current IB, the base current. And after that, what you need is, you need a very high reverse bias in the CB loop, or which is the collector base loop. What this does is, because this is at a higher potential, this is at a lower potential, so now the whatever remaining electrons are there in the N region, which have reached from the emitter region, they are quickly moved towards the battery here. Okay, so in principle, this leads to the net flow of current from the emitter into the base and the collector. So the main equation that is there for this entire chapter is IE is equal to IB plus IC. In paper or in any examination, you will see this question in this form. You should know that this is the central junction, this is the base region, this is the emitter region, this is the collector region, and rest of the principles are exactly similar. Now let's look at some more properties of the BJT. First of all, you should be aware of the different regions of the transistor. Three regions are the active region, the saturation region, and the cutoff region. These three regions. And how are they situated? Your base emitter junction, your base emitter should be forward biased, and your collector base region should be reverse biased. This is generally used when you try to find when you are trying to do an amplification process. In the saturation region saturation is what? Saturation is when both are forward biased, both the circuits, and cutoff is when one is reverse biased and the second one is reverse biased as well. So these two are used for switching circuits. So switch on and off. The first one is for on, this is for on, this is for off. Okay, and this is used for amplification. Okay, with this thing out of the region, by default transistor is in the active region. You should also take a note of the doping concentrations, that doping concentration of E is greater than that of C, which is very much greater than that of B. Also about the width of C is greater than width of E, which is greater than width of B. Now as you can see that I have drawn the common emitter case here. This is the emitter which is common to both the EB junction and the CE junction. First junction is forward biased, the second one is reverse biased. Now I should make a small table for you guys which will be extremely useful during the examination. You should know what the input and what the output currents are in different configurations. If you can look down easily, you can see that for the common emitter case, my input current is IB and my output current is IC. If you go back, when I drew the common base condition, you saw that input current is IE and the output is IC. Similarly, for the common collector case, my input is IB while my output is IE. This you should always remember. And then I've given right here the characteristics of a common emitter diagram. You might be given the characteristics of a common base or a common collector circuit, and then they might ask you questions regarding it. So all you need to know from these is that for the common emitter case, this region is the cutoff region. Okay, and all these regions are active. This is the input characteristics, so it is IB versus VBE. Okay, and this is the output, so it is IC versus VCE. Note that in the first case we keep the VCE to be constant, and while drawing the output characteristics we make the input current to be constant. Next, we will just look at some of the important formulas from this topic. Before that, take a look at the common base, common emitter and common collector configurations. As I mentioned before in the table, the inputs and outputs are mentioned here for the different cases. In the examination, you will be given a circuit which will have these three diagrams as their parts. Sometimes IE, IC and IB will not be written, so you need to make out what these things are. Now we come to current gain. So current gain for a common base is basically the output current divided by the input current. So for the common base, the output is IC and the input is IE. Okay, so you get alpha is equal to IC by IE. That is why now if you know what the input and outputs are for all the three configurations, you can find alpha. Similarly, beta is the current gain for a common emitter case, and gamma is the current gain for a common collector case. These relations between alpha, beta and gamma are very important because sometimes there are direct questions from these. So beta is equal to alpha by 1 minus alpha and gamma is equal to 1 minus alpha, 1 by 1 minus alpha. These two equations should be remembered by you. The voltage gain is nothing but alpha, the current gain times RL by RI. Similarly, for the second case, we will have beta into RL by RI, and third case will be gamma into RL by RI, where RL is the load resistance. Now let's look at a problem to cement our understanding of transistors and maybe learn a few more things. So in this question, a common emitter is provided to you, common emitter circuit. Now there is a variable supply VBB, which is this one, variable supply VBB. VCC is kept constant. Beta DC is given as 200. Beta is your current gain. And RB and RC, that the two resistances, are given as 100 kilo ohm and 1 kilo ohm respectively. Now VBE is also given as 1 volt. Okay, these are the things that are given to you. Now the question is the minimum base current and the input voltage at which the transistor will go to saturation will be respectively. First of all, let me tell you one slight concept. For example, my PN junction in forward bias could be replaced by a battery, which could be replaced by an effective battery, so that when the current passed through it, there was a potential drop across it. For example, it was close to 0.7 electron volt or 0.8 electron volts or something of this sort. Similarly, in a VJT, there are two junctions in total. For the case that is shown here, let me draw the case for you. There are two junctions. There is one junction between base and emitter, and there is one junction between collector and base. At both these junctions, there will be a potential drop. So what VBE is or what VCE are basically the potential drops here, and VBB is solely of the battery that is attached to the side of the base, and VCC is the voltage that is provided by the battery attached there. Okay, so these are some essential concepts. Now you should know that at saturation VCE is equal to 0. So the potential drop between C and E, potential drop between VC and E will become 0. Now we know that VCE is equal to VCC minus IC RC. How did I write this equation? You should revisit your concepts about electricity and current electricity, and then you would remember that you read something about the Kirchhoff's loop rules. So what this complicated circuit is nothing but a transistor which is basically 2 or 3 batteries that are connected together, which have a potential drop across them, and then there is a resistance, there is a voltage, some voltage. Okay, and this circuit is completed. So this is one loop. The second loop is this one, where there is another resistance and another some voltage which is given. So this is another loop. So in every question consisting of transistors, whether you remember a formula or you don't remember a formula, you can always apply the Kirchhoff's loop rules. For example, this is B, this is C, this is E. So this is VBE. If my current is going, and let's say this battery is providing a voltage V. So for the first loop, I can write V minus IR, where I is the current here. Okay, because it's going to the base, I can write IB. V minus IR minus VBE, because there is a drop and going from B to E, is equal to 0. Similarly, for the second case, what can I say? In the second loop, let this be V2, then V2. Let me just assume current is going in this direction, and it may be in the other direction, the sign will reverse. So I can say my V2 minus IC RC minus VCE, because it is jumping from here to here, the net potential drop is equal to 0. So even if you don't remember anything, you just have to apply these two rules and you'll get all the values that you need to solve any question. So now let's come back to the question at hand. So you're given the condition of, we are supposed to find the minimum base current and the input voltage at which the transistor will go to saturation. The condition for saturation is clear to you. At saturation, the potential drop between C and E is equal to 0. So using the loop rule, in the second loop, I can write VCC is equal to VCE is equal to VCC minus ICRC. Okay, from this I can easily write my IC is equal to VCC by RC is equal to 5 into 10 raised to the power minus 3 ampere. Okay, now let's come to current gain. Current gain is given as beta is equal to IC by IB. Okay, that implies IB is equal to 5 into 10 to the power minus 3 divided by 200, or 25 microampere. Now if you look at the input side, which is this one, you have that VBB is equal to IB RB plus VBE. This is again an application of the Kirchhoff loop rule that you read in the chapter on current and electricity. So you have 25 milliampere into 100 kilo ohm plus 1 volt. So VBB turns out to be 3.5 volts. Okay. So VBB is 3.5 volts and this is 25 microampere. So A is the correct answer. This should make many things very clear to you. This entire circuit is very easy to do if you can just apply the two Kirchhoff's loop rules in the two equations, or you have to ignore these things when you're doing the Kirchhoff's loop rules. It's unnecessary. For the actual circuit it's very necessary, but for solving you just need to make sure that you take into consideration the resistances, the battery that is applying the voltage, and the junctions that are there, nothing else. Now let's look at one more problem so that all the concepts are clear. A common emitter amplifier circuit built using an NPN transistor is shown in the figure. Its DC current gain is 250. So DC current gain, which is beta, is equal to 250. And RC is equal to 1 kilo ohm. RC is given to you and VCC is given to you. What is the minimum base current for VCE to reach saturation? Now if you look at this loop, these three are grounded. That means these three are connected to each other. Okay, these three are connected to each other. Actually there should be a line here. Now what this means is, this is the emitter region, this is the base, this is the collector. So this is the common emitter configuration. Now voltage gain for this configuration is nothing but VCC divided by VB, which is nothing but beta into RC by RB. Okay, because beta is IC by IB, and then you multiply I into R to get the respective voltages. So that implies 10 by VB is equal to 250 into 10 to the power 3 by RB, or VB by RB is equal to 1 by 25 into 10 to the power 3 is equal to 40 microampere. So this should be clear to you from this question. Again, what you can do easily in these questions is you can apply a loop rule in this direction, where VB, RB and VBE will come into place. Similarly, you can apply a loop rule here where VCE, RC and VCC will come into place. With only these two equations, you can find everything out. So the next topic that I'm going to discuss are logic gates. This is a very scoring topic. So a logic gate is a digital circuit which is based on certain logical relationships between the inputs that you provide and the outputs that you get. They are generally built using the semiconductor diodes and the transistors we've been learning till now. And each logic gate is expressed by a symbol. The operation of this logic gate is expressed using a truth table, and it is also expressed using an algebraic expression which is known as the Boolean expression. So we will briefly talk about each of these. So let's talk about the first gate, which is the OR gate. The OR operation, which is written as A plus B. You should remember your knowledge on sets for this. So A plus B is nothing but A union B. It is similar to what you read in set theory for A union B. What this means is that the output of the OR gate attains the state 1 if either A is 1 or B is 1. So how do you make a truth table? You simply write the inputs, then you write the outputs. For example, I'm calling the inputs as A and B. This is my symbol. I have an input A, I have an input B, and I have an output C. So I quickly make a truth table. So what will the truth table have? It will have all the possible values of the inputs. So I have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 1, 1, because the only two digits available are 0 and 1. So when 0, 0 happens, you get 0 here. But if B is there and A is not there, you will still get a 1. If A is there and B is not there, you will still get a 1. And when both are there, you will still get a 1. So you can remember that this is similar to the A union B expression. Okay. But you should remember the Boolean expression for this, which is A plus B. Okay. The next gate that we can look at is the AND gate. The AND gate has a symbol like this, where two inputs are there, A and B, and we try to find the output C. If you look at the truth table of the AND gate here, what do you see? The output of the AND gate attains the state 1 if and only if all the inputs are in the state 1. So for 0, 0 case, it is 0. For one of them being 1, it is still 0. And for both of them being 1, it gets a state 1. Okay, so AND gate is written like A dot B, which in the set theory analogy can be written as A intersection B, which is A and B. Okay, you should remember the Boolean expressions. Next is the NOT gate. NOT gate is basically A bar on top of it. The output of the NOT gate attains the state 1 if and only if the input does not contain the state 1. So if the input is 0, we will get a 1. If the input is 1, we will get a 0. This is in the set theory analogy, this is the complement of the set. So whatever your A set is, whatever you set A is, you will get the complement values. So if you have a 0, you will get 1. Okay. So you should remember the symbol for the NOT gate as well. The symbol is a triangle and then there is a circle after it. Note one point, that the circles, every time a circle comes, there is a n attached to it. So it's a NOT or the complement of it. Okay. Next, we can directly go to NAND gates. NAND gates are nothing but A, B and the complement of it. So what does this mean? You had the truth table of AB in which you got once only when both the inputs were 1. If you can look at this picture, right? So when you take a complement of it, you will get ones for all the other values and 0 when both are 1. Okay, it's basically the complement of this set. Okay, so it's A intersection B complement. Okay, if in set theory, what does this mean? This is A complement union B complement. This is the de Moivre's theorem from the set theory. What this means is, if I try to write A and B, 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1. Okay, what is A complement? A complement is 1 1 0 0. B complement is what? B complement is 1 0 1 0. Okay, now when you apply the union of these two, what do you get? You simply get 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 0 here. So that is the basic principle. I think you've done the mathematics lecture as well, so you'll know the basic set theory behind it. So my NAND gate is represented by having a circle after the AND gate. Similarly, the NOR gate will have a circle after the OR gate. Okay, and what is NOR? NOR is nothing but A plus B and the complement of it. Okay, you can look at it. Similarly, there is something known as the XOR gate, which is the exclusive OR gate, and then there is something known as the XNOR gate. So exclusive OR gate is represented by a symbol which is similar to a OR gate, but there is another line here. And for the XNOR case, you will have a circle after this. Okay, what the XOR case means is, if there are two inputs A and B, okay, only when one of them is 1 will you get the answer as 1. For the rest of the cases, whether it is 0 0 or 1 1, will get the answer as 0. Okay, so it's exclusively the case when only one of them is true. And XNOR is what? XNOR is the complement of it. So these are very interesting things, and I'll try to do some questions that will clear your doubts. Let me zoom in. So this is the first question. The logical circuit shown below has the input waveform A and B as shown. Pick out the correct output waveform. So whenever you are given a logical circuit, the first step is for you to make the truth table quickly. So you make the truth table and all the possible values. Now what you do is you start following the circuit. So I have the value 0 0 0 1 1 0 and 1 1. Let's take the first case of 0 0. If I start with 0 0 here, there is a NOT gate here, so this will become, my 0 will become 1 and my 0 will become 1 here. Now 1 and 1 will go to an OR gate. So an OR gate, NOR gate, sorry, there is a circle here. So 1 and 1 will go in and you will get a 0 as the output. So you will get a 0 as the output. When you start with 0 and 1, I have 0 here and 1 here. This 0 will go in, and for the 0 for A will go in. The NOT gate will convert it into a 1. Okay, the 1 of B is converted into a 0. Then 1 and 0 will go into a NOR gate. So it will give me the value of 0 again. Similarly, if I start with 1 0, I'll get the same result. Let's start with 1 1. After NOT, I will get 0 0. The NOR of 0 is 1. Okay, the NOR of 0 is 1. So this is the answer. Now let's see what my input waveform, two input waveforms, my input A and input B are. If you look closely, this region is at 0, this region is at 1, this region is again at 0. Okay, and both these regions are at 1s. So if I start with this, my relation that is given to me is, let me take this part into consideration. For this part, both are 1, both A and B are 1. So your answer will be 1. So you are supposed to get a high value. So either 4 or 1. Next, for this half, the first half, you have A to be 0 and B to be 0. When both are 0, you are supposed to get 0, which is true in both the cases. Now when B is 1 but A is 0, and B is 1 and A is 0, you again are supposed to get 0. Okay, so you get 0 in both the cases. So you move further. You see that at the third point, my A is 1 while my B is 0. My A is 1, B is 0. I should get an answer as 0. Okay, so I get an answer as 0 in this case, but I do not get the answer as 0 in this case. So that is why A is the correct answer. So the previous question did not have many gates in it, and still it took us some time to find the answer if we followed the normal procedure. Now there is a systematic procedure to do the same thing in terms of Boolean algebra. So now I'll give you some laws of Boolean algebra, which will be essential if you want to solve complex logic circuits quickly. Laws of Boolean algebra. These laws are given as follows. There are some laws for the OR gate, some for the AND gate, and some for the NOT gate. For the OR gate, it says that A plus 0 plus, remember that for the OR gate the operation was A plus B. Your output was equal to A plus B. Okay, so remember the symbols that were there for Boolean algebra. So A plus 0 is equal to A, or I will, if I talk only in terms of the analogous of set theory, then I can say that A or an empty set is equal to A. This is analogous to A union phi is equal to A. The second law says A plus 1 is equal to 1, which is basically A union the universal set is equal to A again. Sorry, the universal set. If I have A plus A is equal to A, this is analogous to A union A is equal to A. Similarly for AND gate, if I write, the laws are A dot 0 is equal to 0, because A intersection phi is equal to phi. For the people who have not taken math, I have not taken math for their courses. I request that you remember these things, and for the people who have taken math, I request you that you may find analogs easily and then remember them from these relations. So A dot 1 is equal to A. What this means is A intersection the entire U or the universal set is A, and the third law is A dot A is equal to A, which implies that A intersection A is equal to A. Similarly for NOT, A plus A bar is equal to 1. So A union A complement is equal to U. If I write A dot A bar, I will find it to be 0. And similarly, if I write A bar bar dot A, I will find it to be A. So just like set theory, like the complement of a complement is equal to the set itself. Similarly, A bar bar is equal to A. People who have not done set theory, you can just remember this as follows, that in the first case there is an OR gate in which there are two inputs A and 0. This is the OR gate. So irrespective of what the value of A is, because the other output is just 0, I will get A as the output. However, if 1 and A are there and there is an OR gate, I will get the answer as 1, because irrespective of whether A is 0 or 1, its combination with 1 will always give me 1. Same is the case for the AND gate and the NOT gate. The commutative laws hold, which means that A plus B or A or B is equal to B or A, and A and B is equal to B and A. Similarly, the basic distributive laws also hold that A and B plus C is equal to A and B plus A and C. This plus means OR, the OR gate. All these symbols are telling you about some gates. Let me zoom out a little and write some of these things down again for you. Okay. Yeah. There are some other laws that you might use, which are not exactly laws but identities, that A plus AB is equal to A. What this means is, in terms of sets, you have A union A intersection B is equal to A. Okay. Now I'll stop writing the set analogous because I think you guys already know them. So this is an useful identity. Similarly, A and A plus B is equal to A. And we have identities such as the De Morgan's theorem, which say that A plus B bar is whenever you have a NOT gate or a NAND gate, you have a bar over it. So A plus B bar is equal to A bar dot B bar. Okay. So what this actually means in terms of logic gates is, this is a NAND gate where the input to the NAND gate is, it is a NOT gate with the input A plus B. Okay. Or if I want to write it explicitly for you guys to understand, what this means is, there is an OR gate first where A and B come in. The output is A plus B. Okay. And then this goes into a NOT gate from which I get A plus B bar. Okay. So this is the first theorem from De Morgan, and the second theorem says that A dot B bar is equal to A bar dot B bar. Okay. You might, if you've done set theory, you might remember these forms, and if you've not done set theory, then I request you to just try to see what this means in terms of logic circuits, because this will reduce the time that the problem takes to solve. So let's look at one problem here, and you can see that this has 4 NAND gates in total. So I can go through and write the truth table with the normal general procedure, but it will take slightly longer time. It's not a wrong procedure at all. If you have the time in your paper, you should try that only. But here let's try doing this using some properties, and this is an easy question. Let me zoom into the circuit so that I don't have to draw the circuit again. Remember one thing, that I'll erase this. You have to remember one thing, that a NAND gate means A dot B bar. Okay, so dot is a AND gate and the bar over it makes it a NAND gate. So how do you find the truth table for a structure like this? You start with the input and you start writing the inputs to various gates. So A is going there, so B is going there. Now A and B are entering. This first NAND gate. So my output will be A dot B bar. This output will go here and here. Now they enter the second and NAND gate. This will be A dot B bar. dot A, and then this entire thing will have a bar over it. Okay, similarly here I will have A dot B bar, and this will be dotted with B. The entire thing will have a bar over it. Now these two will go into this gate, and what you will get is A dot B bar dot B whole bar dotted with the upper one, A dot B bar dot A whole bar, and because it's an AND gate, the entire thing will have a bar over it. Okay, so this is my output. Now to write this output one by one, it will be really hard. So now I try to simplify this equation. Okay, now my De Moivre's theorem says that C dot D bar is equal to C bar plus D bar. Okay, let me, this will become C, this will become D. So I can write A dot B bar dot B whole bar and a bar over it plus A dot B bar dot a bar over it and a bar over the entire thing using this property applied to this. Okay, so the RHS becomes this. Now as I said before, A bar is equal to A. Okay, when you take the NOT of a NOT gate, you get back the same thing. What this means is, if you have a NOT gate, you start with A, you get from here A bar, you put it inside another NOT gate, you get back A. Okay, so when I do this, these two cancel, what am I left with? I am left with A dot B bar dot B plus A dot B bar dot A. Now now A dot B bar is equal to A bar plus B bar. Okay, again, so I can write this as A plus B dot B plus A bar plus B bar dot A. Now B dot B bar gives you a value of 0. What does this mean? B dot B bar, you are taking an AND gate where one component is B, another is B bar. So if I make a truth table for this, B bar and Y, what will I get? B, if B is 0 0 0 1, sorry, if B is 0, then B bar is 1. If B is 1, then B bar is 0. In both the cases, if I take an AND gate through it, I will get a 0. Okay, this was also one of the identities, but now that you see this is going to 0, so I will have A bar dot B remaining plus B bar dot A remaining from the second one. Okay, so my entire output reduced to this quantity alone. Now how do I, now making the truth table is very easy. I write A, I write B, and I write my output A bar dot B plus B bar dot A. So instead of that, let's just write the two things separately, A bar and B bar, and my output Y. Now you try to make the truth table from this. To make the truth table, you have to take all the possible combinations of A and B. Okay, so there are 4 possible combinations. You have 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1. Okay, so for 0 0, for the 0 case, A bar becomes 1, this becomes 1, this is 0, this is 0. For the second one, this becomes 1, this becomes 0, this becomes 1, this becomes 0. Okay, now when you apply the Y to be of this form, you find then when A and B are both 0, okay, then you get the value of y as 0. When you apply that A is 0 and B is 1, when A is 0 and B is 1, you find that the value of y is 1. Similarly, when you find that A is 1 and B is 0, then you find that the value of y is 1 again, and when both are 1, you find the value of y to be 0. Okay, when you look at the table above, which of these is correctly corresponding to it? For the 0 0 case, you should get 0. So either 3 or 4 is the case. Next, for the 0 1 case, you have the answer as 1. So for the second row tells you that this is right and this is wrong. That is why third is your correct answer. Okay, doing these expressions makes it very simple. If you have a basic idea of set theory and those identities which are analogous to the identities you've studied before, then it is extremely simple to do questions of any sort. Here there were only NAND gates. You could have questions in which they might give you NOR gates or they might give you NOT gates. So it's very easy if you first try to write the output as an expression in terms of some A bars and B bars, and then calculate them separately and then make a truth table out of them. So the last section of this lecture consists of the principles of communication. Questions from this section are primarily factual based in nature, but there are some formula based questions as well, which I will try to discuss with you. The basic setup of a communication system is shown before you. You have an information source that sends you a message, and then there is a whole chain of transmission through a channel, and then a receiver receives that message and gives it to the user. The transmitter basically converts the message signal into an electrical signal and then transmits it through the channel. And the receiver on the other end, it will receive the transmitted signal and it will reconstruct the original message to the end user. Okay. Now there are different terminologies that we will be using while studying it, and I have marked them down for you, the essential terms, and I'll just tell you one line about each so that if these come in the paper in some form, you have a revision of these concepts. So a transducer is a device that converts one form of energy into another. So for example, you have microphones at home, those are transducers. What is a signal? Signal is the information that is converted into the electrical form, which can be both analog and digital. This is an analog signal and this is a digital signal. Okay. What is an analog? An analog is a continuously varying signal, and the digital signal is a discrete stepwise signal. Next, we talk about noise. Noise are some unwanted signals that tend to disturb the transmission process. The transmitter is basically a device that processes the incoming message and makes it suitable for retransmission. The receiver extracts the desired message signals. Attenuation is a process of loss of strength of signals when they propagate through space. Amplification, on the other hand, is the process of increase in the amplitude of a signal by using something known as an amplifier. What is the range? The range is the largest distance between the source and the destination up to which the signal can be received with enough strength. Let's talk about bandwidth. Bandwidth is the frequency range over which an equipment operates, or the portion of the spectrum occupied the signal. The last three, modulation, demodulation and repeater, are essential. So modulation is, why is modulation necessary? The original low frequency message or information signal cannot be transmitted to long distances. So what people do is, at the transmission end, an information is contained in the low frequency message signal, and that is superimposed into a high frequency wave, which is known as the carrier wave. Okay, this process is known as modulation, and the process of retrieval of the original information from the carrier wave is known as demodulation. Sometimes you will be often hearing about repeaters as well. So a repeater acts as a receiver and a transmitter. So it will pick up a signal which is coming from the transmitter and it will amplify and retransmit it with a change in the carrier frequency. Having looked at all the basic definitions, now let's move on to the propagation of EM waves. Now the propagation of these waves can happen through three processes: ground wave propagation, sky wave propagation, and space wave propagation. In the ground wave propagation, the radio waves travel through the atmosphere and following the surface of the earth. In sky wave propagation, they get reflected back from the ionosphere, and in the space wave propagation, they get reflected back from the troposphere region. The important thing to note here is the range of frequencies that these can support. Ground waves can support up to 2 to 3 megahertz. Sky wave can support around 2 to 30 megahertz, and space wave can support around 30 to 300 megahertz. Factual questions are often based on these three properties. Now there is another equation that might be of interest to you if you are preparing for the examination, which is the maximum line of sight between the two antennas, the transmitting antenna and the receiving antenna. So the maximum line of sight between these is given by dm is equal to root over 2 times radius of earth into height of the antenna. Okay, so this is an interesting formula that you should remember. Ground waves can support up to 2 to 3 megahertz. Sky wave can support around 2 to 30 megahertz, and space wave can support around 30 to 300 megahertz. Factual questions are often based on these three properties. Now there is another equation that might be of interest to you if you are preparing for the examination, which is the maximum line of sight between the two antennas, the transmitting antenna and the receiving antenna. So the maximum line of sight between these is given by dm is equal to root over 2 times radius of earth into height of the antenna. Next, we look at the process of modulation. Here, any electrical signal which is there at the input, which we will also call as the messenger signal, is mounted onto another signal of very high frequency, which is known as the carrier signal. And how is this done? This is done through several processes. Three of those are amplitude modulated signal, frequency modulated signal, and pulse modulated signal. For our course and for the examinations, we will focus on the first two, which is amplitude modulated signal and frequency modulated signal. Now what is modulated in the process? The messenger signal is the reference, and the carrier frequency changes its amplitude, its frequency, and the pulses while being sent. Let me explain this. Let's take a look at the amplitude modulated signal. So depending on the value of the input signal, the messenger signal, let me call it M, and this is C. So as you can see, when the input signal takes a high value, the amplitudes of my carrier are high. When my messenger takes a low value, my amplitudes are low. Okay, and as the value starts increasing, my amplitude starts increasing. So this is how you modulate the amplitudes of the carrier frequency. Let's take a look at the frequency modulation. Now the same thing applies. When my messenger takes a high value, the frequency is high for the FM signal or the carrier signal. When it becomes low, the frequency becomes low, and so on and so forth. So what you should remember is, depending on the value that the messenger signal has, my envelope or my frequency or my pulse of the carrier frequency changes. So let's look at some questions from the chapter on communication systems. You will often find that you learn a new topic or a new concept when you do a problem in these chapters, because these are extremely lengthy and none of the books or none of the coaching institutes cover them properly. And in the paper, when you go for the paper and attempt the questions, you often find that a new formula or a new concept has been asked. So that does not happen, we are going to practice plenty of questions so that we learn whatever new things are there to be learned. So in this question, you see that in a communication system operating at a wavelength of 800 nanometer, only 1% of the source frequency is available as signal bandwidth. The number of channels accommodated for transmitting TV signals of bandwidth 6 MHz are, they've given the velocity of light and the Planck's constant. Now you know that lambda is given, so you can easily find the frequency, because frequency f, I'll use a bigger tool. Okay, now frequency f is equal to the velocity divided by lambda for an electromagnetic wave is equal to 3 into 10 to the power 8, which is given as c, by 8 into 10 to the power minus 7, which comes out to be 30 by 8 into 10 to the power 14, which is nothing but 3.75 into 10 to the power 14 hertz. Okay, when I try to convert this to megahertz, I can write this simply as 3.75 into 10 to the power 6 mHz. Now I will write this in another pen. Now you should note that the number of channels accommodated for transmission, the number of channels used for transmission is equal to the bandwidth of the channel divided by the bandwidth that is required for each channel. Okay, this is fairly easy to see. If you apply this concept, then you get the value as 3.75 into 10 to the power 6 divided by 6, nothing but 6.25 to 10 to the power 5, which is your answer number C. So in the next question, the modulation frequency of an AM radio station is given as 250 kHz, which is 10% of the carrier wave. If another AM station approaches you for a license, what broadcast frequency will you allot? So the broadcast frequency that you allot should be done in such a way such that the two carrier waves do not superimpose on each other. So how do we approach this question? First of all, we can easily write the frequency of the carrier wave, which is given to be 10% of the modulation frequency. So Fc is equal to 250 divided by 0.1 is equal to 2500 kilohertz. Okay, now let me say that this is my frequency number 1. I'll call this F1 of the carrier wave 1. Similarly, I need to find the frequency of another carrier wave 2. Now to do this, I should have that the difference between these two should be at least 2 times the modulation frequency that is there for the signal, which is 2 times 250, which is 500. Therefore, my second carrier wave frequency can be F1 plus 500, or it can be F1 minus 500. Okay, so my F2 can have the values of 3000 or 2000. Now let's look at one more question. To double the covering range of a TV transmitting tower, its height should be multiplied by what? We know that the range of transmission is nothing but root 2 times root into 2 times h into r, where h is the height. Thus, to double the range, I have to increase my h by 4 times. Range is the dm that I told you about when we were discussing. So the answer is 3. With this question, we complete this lesson on modern physics, and I hope you guys will be able to attempt multiple questions from this chapter in the paper.